0. Kodiak, you start recording.
Good evening, everyone. It is my privilege to call to order the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District Board of Directors meeting for Monday, February 13th, 2023. Could we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Oglesby,
Here.
Director Paul,
Here.
Director Eisenhart,
Here.
Director Riley,
Here.
Director Edwards,
Here.
Vice Chair Anderson, Chair Adams,
Here.
and we have a quorum of the board.
Thank you. And could we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
To the
to
flag
the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation,
under God,
God,
indivisible,
individual,
with
with
liberty
liberty
and
and
justice
for all.
for all. Thank you for that. And now I will see if there are any additions or corrections to the agenda, and I believe that there are a couple. Joel, do you want to
Yes.
handle that for us?
And just as a note, Director Anderson has joined us.
Sorry for being late.
Yes, due to the need for immediate consideration by the board for matters that arose after the posting of the published agenda and as provided by Government Code Sections 54954.2 of the California Government Code, the board is being asked to make the following corrections. A revised exhibit for item number 1 was submitted. In addition, a revised exhibit for item number 15A was submitted by staff. And then under consent calendar, the agenda currently reads, consider approval of annual purchase of internet license for Waterwise Gardening in Monterey. The word county should be inserted after the word Monterey. And then towards the bottom underneath adjournment under board meeting schedule, that should read Monday, May 15th, 2023. And those are all the additions and corrections.
Thank you. And I believe that I'll need to take a motion to approve the additions and corrections.
I so move.
Thank you. Is there a
I'll
second?
second it.
Thank you. And is there any member of the public who wishes to comment on the corrections and additions?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Thank you. Then if we could please do a roll call vote.
Yes. Director Edwards,
Approval.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Thank you very much. With that, we will go to our oral communications, and this is the opportunity for any member of the public who wishes to comment on anything that isn't on today's agenda. Is there any member of the public who wishes to come forward and make public comment at this time? And you can raise your hand via Zoom to let us know that you are interested in speaking, or you can just shout out and I'll try to pick it up. I'm not
I
seeing
see no
anything.
raised hands.
Thank you very much, Joelle. With that, we will close public comment and go on to our consent calendar. Is there any member of the board who wishes to pull anything for comment or questions on the consent calendar?
I would like to pull items 3 and 5 just to ask a couple questions.
Okay. Is there anyone else who wants to pull anything from the agenda, consent agenda? Okay. Why don't we take yours, Karen, and then we'll go out to the public and see if any member of the public wishes to pull anything from consent.
Thank you. My questions are about there's some items concerning grant activities. My concern is about whether grants that we were expecting, grant revenues, have been delayed or possibly lost in the periods considered in those two reports. I would,
Director Paul, this is Suresh. No, it's not that the grants were lost, but basically what happens at the beginning of the fiscal year when we do the budget, we come up with the dollar amount for the grants that's expected to be received, but keep in mind on the expense side, it has to be expensed before it is billed and received from the grantor. And so basically those projects are not on the exact timeline as we expect. What I do with the budget itself, I just take an annual amount and I divide it by a number of quarters that we are reporting on. And so it's just a straight line. So let's say when I'm reporting in December, I just say it's 1/2 of the grant amount, but that's technically not how the actual grant timeline is. So most of those grants are going to materialize, but towards the end of the fiscal year.
okay, thank you.
But yeah, none of the grants were lost, no.
Okay, the timeline is just
The
changed.
timing, correct.
Thank you. Okay,
And Karen, is that your same question for item number 5?
yes, yes.
Okay, great. Any other member of the board who wishes to pull anything for comment or question? I'm seeing no hands raised. Is there any member of the public who wishes to pull any item on the consent calendar for questions or comment?
Chair Adams, I see no raised hands.
Great. Okay, with that, we will close the consent calendar and see if we could have a motion to approve it.
I move.
Thank you. That's Mark Eisenhart. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Director Edwards. Good. Could we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Paul,
Yes,
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye.
The motion is adopted.
Great. Thank you very much. Moving right along, we will go to one of the more fascinating parts of our meeting, which is the General Manager's report. General Manager Stoltz, please provide a verbal report.
Thank you. Not sure about the most exciting part of the meeting, but we'll go with that one. Let me just bring this up. I'll cover both items 9 and 10. The first being item 9, a report on compliance. And as you can see, we're far outpacing the quarterly water budget in terms of the two regulated pieces of our water resource system. Carmel River significantly below the budget, and the Seaside Groundwater Basin quite a bit below the budget. A lot of this has to do with the rain, offsetting need for irrigation and other outdoor uses, as well as a little bit more pure water Monterey withdrawals during this rainy season. So you may recall that in the summers, Monterey One Water is serving the Castroville Seawater Intrusion Project. And so there's a little more competition for source waters during the summer months. In the winter months, there's very little need for other source waters. So we're able to produce more pure water Monterey water. And that can be seen on the next slide, which is, you can see that pure water Monterey recovery is over the target level. And because of rain, there's what are called Table 13 water rights that Cal-Am holds that would not be available if it were a dry year. And Sand City desal is producing a little more than might be expected. And that's because the intake water with all the rain is at a lower TDS than previously. After 4 months, production for customer service, you can see down here, is slightly ahead of last year's pace by 38 acre feet. Again, that would most likely be a byproduct of the rains offsetting irrigation usage. Here is rainfall at the San Clemente gauge. You can see that December and January have just been way over the top in terms of production, and blue being the current year and red being long-term averages. And I think we all experienced it, so we don't need to be told that it's a very rainy year. But you can tell here, the red line is cumulative rainfall. So we got about 0.6 inches so far in February. Not a whole lot, just these few days in the early part of the month. But we're closing in on 25 inches total for the year. That's meaningful because through the end of January, we were experiencing the wettest rainfall on record. We've now kind of through this February 13th date, yesterday, today, but as of last night, you know, we're heading into what looks like will end as a wet year, unless we get significant rain again, and this dotted line heads back up into the extremely wet area. So we've been tracking an extremely wet through January and currently through February. But in the absence of any more rain for the rest of the year, we will likely end up in the wet year, which is still, you know, better than above normal. So no complaints here. And then similarly, this is unimpaired stream flow measured at Sleepy Hollow. January was just way over the top, as you would imagine, with flooding and so forth. And I've got a graphic later to show you how much water the river has released to the ocean, if you will, at the Highway 1 gauge. We'll take a look at that. ASR injection, the blue line is cumulative. The orange lines are the dailies. We're gonna probably pierce the 400 acre feet for the year sometime this morning, overnight. And we're averaging about 9 to 10 acre feet per day, which is a little bit below capacity of 13 acre feet per day. And there is testing of 2 new pump stations going on this week in the CalAm system. So we think once that's done, once all of the wells that were turned off for flooding are fully back online, then we'll be able to do 13 acre feet per day, about 2,900 gallons per minute. And as I said, today we're still at 2,300 gallons per minute, so a little under total capacity. That concludes item 9. Moving to item 10, conditions on the river. For those of you who drive in the valley, you can see that, you know, flood stage is gone. Everything's, I won't say back to normal, but it's down in the channel. We are cooperating with the county folks, regional park districts, and providing consulting on potential solutions, long-term solutions for further flooding in the future. But this is really what we see now in the river. Significant numbers of downed trees. That's one of our guys, Kian. We're seeing debris piles, just, you know, enormous amounts of debris that was moved by the river. We're seeing devegetated banks where a lot of shrubbery was taken out. And here you can see a tree on its side with a root ball. What it does is it opens up a lot of the view into the river. And then strainers. So this is a bunch of debris that's accumulated, stuck to a tree. At flood stage, the water would race through and then deposit this material. This is about 9 feet above the stream bed. A lot of sand deposition. This is all new sand that was deposited just west of the San Carlos Bridge. And there has been a lot of cobble moved around. This isn't significantly different than what it used to look like. This is also facing west off the Rancho San Carlos Road Bridge. But the devegetation has opened it up, so it's now very visible, where previously you wouldn't have seen all of these cobble bars. And then finally, this is 2017, and this is 2023. And this is acre feet passing by the Highway 1 gauge. John Lear put this together for me, and it tells a very interesting story. At this time, through January of 2017, there was 74,029 acre feet that had gone out through the lagoon. Through the same point, you know, the end of January this time, it's been 91,512. So
Wow.
significantly higher than in 2017. You may recall in 2017, we banked about 2,400 acre feet through the ASR program. We won't be able to match that this time because of other constraints on that program. But this is, you know, that is a lot of water moving out. You know, the average amount of water that flows to sea, factoring in dry years and wet years, is about 50,000 acre feet per year. So, you know, we're well over the average already through January. We're ahead of 2017. So if we get, let's say a little more rain in February and March, you know, we should be up again at that 150 to 200,000 acre feet running out to the ocean, which there's no pipe big enough to capture everything that goes, and obviously no reservoir big enough to capture it all either. But ASR is our our storage mechanism for moving some of that water over, and you know, and we're working on it. That should conclude item 10 as well.
Great. We'll see if any board members have questions, and I see that Amy and then George have their hands up. Amy?
Yeah, I'm interested, Dave, in knowing what wells is Cal-Am using right now that's different, kept bouncing around on the state. I don't know where I'm talking. That they're using right now, that they're trying out, or what's happening with the wells?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things going on. For those folks who live in Pebble Beach, Carmel, and part of Carmel Valley, there was a notice sent out that you might see discoloration in your water supply, and to run your faucet to move it. What's happening there is the Forest Lake tanks have a new pump station, and so they're able to push water uphill. And then there's another new pump station at Rancho San Carlos Road that also moves water further uphill in the Carmel Valley. So just the prospect of changing the direction of flow in the existing sealed transmission system or distribution system might result in discoloration. So those two new pump stations are being tested. I believe it began middle of last week and through the rest of this week. And there were notices put out to all the customers. Then up in the flooded area, so the upper Carmel River wells, many of them were turned off during the flooding because water levels were getting so high that you could short out the power. And so as those come back online, they need to be tested to make sure there's no traces of bacteria. A couple of those wells had difficulty getting 2 clean tests in a row. But my understanding is they're almost all back online. But until these new pump stations get fully tested, then Carmel Valley is primarily served by what's called the Segunda tank, which is in the Tehama subdivision. And in order to maintain tank levels, if one or more wells on the Carmel River are out, it gets harder to meet both customer demand and then keep pressure in that tank. And so that's what has been affecting us for the last couple of weeks. And my understanding is there is one well in the Carmel Valley that the motor went out and that needs to be repaired. So you've got a limitation on total capacity in the valley as well. So we could inject at about 2,900 gallons per minute, but because of all of this bringing wells back on and the testing of the pump station, we're kind of stuck still at about 23 gallons, 100 gallons per minute.
Thank you.
George, and then Alvin.
Dave, I have 2 questions. One is how many more days look possible for ASR take?
Yeah, and John is on, but it's probably still more like 4 to 5 weeks rather than days. because there's so much saturation, and there are water levels in the valley that are actually higher than the than the mean water level in the river. And so that'll just continue to fill the river and keep the flows up. And so we'll be, over our minimum in-stream flow requirements in the water permits for quite some time. I don't know, John, if you want to add to that.
I would say I just resharpened my pencil on that today, and I think it's probably something around like 20 to 25 more days with no more rain. So we just have to. We're in the game of looking at the 10-day forecast and hoping for rain each time now.
Yep.
All right, thank you. My second question, Dave, and I don't want a long answer, and maybe I ought to take it up in committee, but when meeting customer demand becomes kind of an actionable item, what happens when there's a dilemma of some kind that you do not meet customer demand? What are the situations that create the problem of not meeting customer demand?
Yeah, more often than not, it would be during peak times in the summer months. But you size your system to different parameters, like 150% of peak and so forth. But you also figure out your firm capacity is based on losing a well or losing your largest supply source within either within the utility as a whole or within a sub area of the utility, if you're unable to move water easily from area to area to area. And so it's you kind of look at that firm capacity number, and that's why you build extra production wells, so that if you lose one, you still have enough and you don't have a crisis. But the other methods of dealing with it is stored water. And so, it's always nice to have stored water in the ground as long as you've got enough production capacity to get it out. But yeah, the worst thing is you get out in a summer peak day and then you lose a major well or, a major production source. And then you're kind of stuck, and you'll have a short-term emergency that you have to deal with.
I may want to take this up in a committee discussion a little more. So just
Sure.
Heads up.
Yep.
Thank you.
And Alvin, did you have your hand up?
Yes, I did, Chair. Thank you. Just a couple of questions. For all this rain, and I know the state is still in drought, is the peninsula still in drought, or will we be still in drought? Or can we petition the state to remove us off that if we get enough some more rain?
Yeah, so we're still in stage 2, which we did to kind of move with the whole state. But yeah, technically speaking, we will not be in drought. We are not in drought. Drought, our nomenclature for drought is 2 dry or critically dry years in a row based on unimpaired stream flow. So clearly we were in a water year based on those 2 charts I showed you earlier that won't line up as 2 in a row. So we're working our way out of drought during the current water year. That being said, we still have a shortfall because you're not supposed to violate your pumping limits. So there's a limit on the river. The aquifer under the river just completely filled up. So there's a 5 to 6 year supply in the river's aquifer to serve the maximum water right. So in other words, Cal-Am's entitled to 3,376 acre feet per year. And that aquifer, when it fills up, has 5 to 6 times that amount of water in it. So we could go dry for the next several years and they would be able to meet their Carmel River water right. On the Seaside Basin, you've got to imagine that a lot of this rain is infiltrating in, which will help with the natural safe yield numbers. But it's not the same kind of thing where you can say, oh yeah, in December, or in this case, in January, it filled up to the max. It doesn't fill as quickly. But as long as there's water in the wells, the adjudication says that CalAm can take its 1,474 acre feet per year. So our shortfall is just when you look at the firm supplies and call it pure water Monterey at 3,500, Seaside Basin at 1,474, and the Carmel River at 3,376. That water is there. And so that amount is available, but that amount only adds to 8,350 acre feet. And demand consistently has been in the, the 9,600 acre feet range. And so you have to make up the difference, and you make up the difference with Sand City desal, with stored water, occasionally what are called carryover credits from other pumpers on the Seaside Basin and so forth. So the challenge for each of the next several years until there's a new permanent water supply coming online is, how do you make up that 1,000 acre feet per year? And so that's what's great about rain. You get those table 13 water rights that you wouldn't get in a dry year. You put more into the ASR bank so that you can pull it out, and so forth. But, as I've said before, praying for rain is not a strategy. It's something we'll continue to do, but, long term, you need to build something.
Okay, and my next question is, could you give us a quick update on Measure J? Are we going into something different in the next couple of months, or what?
Yes, and thank you for asking. We will be coming to the board in a closed session prior to its next meeting in March to discuss real property valuation, and basically a full appraisal of the enterprise based on current information. And then we will be looking for direction from the board as to how it wants to proceed on making an offer for purchase of the CalAm Monterey water system, and potentially scheduling a hearing of public necessity sometime in the summer. So a lot to be talked about in closed session. As I said, it will be about real property valuation. And it'll give you an opportunity as a board to make a decision on whether you want to make a formal offer or not.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other board member that wishes to ask comments or make questions, or ask questions or make comments? Okay, I just have one. So going back to the status of the river, who is responsible for cleaning the river up?
That's a great question. If it's in your trees as a homeowner, it's typically the private homeowner. If it relates to erosion and potential erosion control, our crews will be down in the channel doing a lot of the clearing. Thomas is I think on Thomas Christensen. He can kind of split the hairs on that. We occasionally will clear some as a courtesy, but we're not supposed to be clearing brush for flood control purposes. Thomas, you want to elaborate a little bit on that one?
Yeah, so the district has a program which we call vegetation management, and it's been in place since 1990. And what it's really designed to do is to take care of hazards in the river that could divert flow into stream banks and cause erosion. And those hazards can be considered a large eucalyptus tree or cottonwood that falls across the river. So we inspect the river and we identify those sites typically in late spring, and we create a working list and then apply for permits from all the regulatory agencies. And we usually get approval in August, September timeframe, and then we do the work, and then we're supposed to be out of the river by roughly October 15th or the end of October. After a large rain event like we had and a flood, you get a lot of down trees and debris piles. So we're compiling a list now of the sites that we have that we've deemed problematic. There's debris piles everywhere. There's some that are bigger and more substantial that can potentially create a problem. So those are the ones we're focusing on and will be on the list. And we're going to apply to see if we can get an emergency permit to deal with those, hopefully within the next month or so, and maybe even earlier if poor weather's in the forecast, we may be able to get permission to move forward within a couple weeks. That being said, we have a crew of fishery biologists and hydrologists that run chainsaws occasionally, but when the level of work gets to be well beyond what our crew can handle, we've hired the California Conservation Corps in the past to help us. So we're looking this year to get some help from them. And that's what, you know, some of the earlier staff notes were about, is using some of that flood and drought reserve to fund that. We always tell, and this is where people get confused, we always tell property owners that we're not a flood control agency. Any work that we do in the channel, if there's any flood control benefit, it's incidental. It's really removing hazards and preventing debris blockages that would, you know, turn the river into a neighborhood or people's houses and related to erosion. But obviously, if a large tree falls across the river and we cut it into sections, there is some benefit for flood control for property owner.
Thomas, were we able to apply for or receive any FEMA Federal Emergency Management Act funding, since this was part of the emergency, to help us offset the costs of?
Yeah, so
fixing
I'm not
things?
I'm not a FEMA expert. What I am learning, and we still have it as a placeholder, but what I'm learning is that FEMA requires a really high bar to prove that what you're doing is a benefit to a property owner, to prevent some kind of impact to them. And so where all of this gets very complicated, and I don't fully understand it yet, is there's work on private property and there's work on public property. The district owns no property along the river. And so the district may not get reimbursed for work on private property, but somebody like the park district could maybe get reimbursed. I don't fully understand it. We're still kind of working our way through the application process and trying to understand what would qualify for reimbursement and what wouldn't qualify for reimbursement.
But we are in the queue. We've got Simona Mossbacher on our staff attended the joint meeting on Friday last week, and we're following all of the criteria. We have our own cleanup projects related to Sleepy Hollow that are on expenditures that we'll try to get reimbursed through FEMA or OES at the state. We've already done work on that access road that we've spent the money. We'd like to try to get reimbursed. But yeah, trying to run a crew of California Conservation Corps folks and get reimbursed for that cost is an unknown at this point. It's still work that needs to get done, but we don't know if we'll, you know, and we've done it in the past, where we have footed the bill, not gotten reimbursement.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you. So that gives me a question for the staff at large. Is COES more forgiving than FEMA on that property ownership question? And then the second thing is, Thomas, can you quantify the pileups, if you will, of debris? You said that there were a bunch of them and then some were particularly significant. How many is on your list, especially the ones of significance? So those are my two questions.
We have approximately probably 6 sites that we really, you know, would like to do modification or cutting of debris piles. So there's a handful of trees that are across the river, so that's part of it. And then there's smaller ones that are not as critical that we would, if we had the time, we would chip away at those as well. But
6 big ones.
yeah, 6 big areas right now that we'd like to do work.
Yeah, and as far as who's easier, I don't see Simona attending, and I don't really have a good answer for you on that.
Okay.
Great. Any additional questions from the board? And I can't recall, but you'll have to let me know, General Manager, do we take this out to the public for questions as well?
No need to.
Okay, all right, thank you. And thank you for your report. And now we will go to the report from our district council.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. As you all know, we did not have a closed session this month. One of the reasons for not having closed session is that there's been no significant development and no decisions for the board to be made in any of our various venues. I would love to be able to report to you that the Public Utilities Commission has taken action, but it has not. That remains a black box. There is no word whatsoever as to what the commission will do on the request for modification of the district or the request for rehearing of Cal-Am. So hopefully at some point in the future, we'll have some idea as to what's going on with the water purchase agreement issue. Turning to the Coastal Commission, that's also a little bit of a black box. Although the Coastal Commission did make a decision on Cal-Am's application for its coastal development permit for its desal plant. That was in November. We still have not seen the writing. We have not seen the written conditions on that, and we don't know when we will. We have filed our action challenging the Coastal Commission's decision. And as you know, the Coastal Commission is represented by the Office of the Attorney General in matters of litigation. That has been assigned to a specific Deputy Attorney General, Joel Jacobs. He is a known litigator for the Attorney General's office, and members of our team have had experience with him, and we feel comfortable with him as an advocate. In early discussions with him, he has confirmed that the Coastal Commission's practice is to prepare the administrative record, and it will not vary on that. That process that will be filed is that the parties will jointly request that the record be prepared, and that the Coastal Commission will then prepare an estimate as to both to the size and the cost of the record. Of course, it's hard to produce a record when they haven't even finished drafting the conditions on the permit that they did issue. So once we get an estimate as to the cost and the size of the record, then they will send us a bill for the preparation of that record. We're estimating that will be between $20,000 and $30,000 for preparation of the record. Only once the Coastal Commission receives that payment do they begin working on the record itself. Mr. Jacobs has indicated that he estimates that it will take 6 months to complete the preparation of the record. So we're looking at a record that will be not available until midsummer at best. And before the record is lodged, there is no obligation of the Coastal Commission to respond to the pleadings on record. So the process is we get the estimate for the record, we pay for the record, the Coastal Commission prepares the record, and then once that is lodged for everyone to see, that's when the litigation process begins in earnest. So we're not expecting, quite frankly, a hearing on this matter during 2023. If it happens in 2023, it'll be towards the end of that year. There is a possibility, the matter has been filed in Monterey County. There is a possibility that there will be a request for change of venue, but it is too early to know if that will happen or where the case would be reassigned to. That's, again, it's a bit of a black box. We have a little more information there, but that's the status report from my desk. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Council. Alvin, your hand's up.
You-
And you're muted. There we
Thank
go.
you, Chair. Mr. Laredo, since we're in this black box, can we get out of the black box? There's $42 million in grant money sitting someplace for this district. Can we petition the CPUC, tell them that that kind of money is out there? I'm gonna talk a little bit more on that
We,
at the next one, but is it something that we can do with next door about that $42 million that we're possible about to lose?
we have been in discussions with the other parties to the Public Utilities Commission. We are subject to very strict Public Utility Commission rules as to what can and cannot be stated. But we are collectively discussing a process by which we could communicate with the ALJ to push this along, to make them aware that there are significant consequences of any delay.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next we have Mark and then George.
Thank you, Chair Adams. Mr. Laredo, the clock, does it not even start ticking for anything until the record is perfected on the CCC litigation? By that, I mean, for example, even if the CCC doesn't have to file a responsive pleading, can there be discovery conducted, or is that just not advisable? And does the clock not even start ticking until a responsive pleading is filed for purposes of potential venue attacks?
Technically, there is no clock that started. There was a shot clock that would be held against the district or any other, but we did meet that. So there is no pending limitation. There should not be any discovery if the record is prepared in an appropriate way. This is a writ of mandate, and it will be tried on the record. Now, of course, there are questions as to what will be in the record. For instance, we would like to make sure that we discover internal communications amongst staff. So we have had discussions with the Deputy Attorney General as to that, and we've made it clear that if we need to agree what's in the record, and if not everything is going to be in the record that we believe is appropriate, then we have both the opportunity for discovery and making public records requests of the Coastal Commission so we can see what those communications are. And we have begun those discussions with the Deputy Attorney General, and quite frankly, we have already begun some of the Public Records Act requests to nibble around the edges there. We're trying to identify what the Coastal Commission actually thinks the record is. We've seen some cases where they say the record is only those matters that were actually put before the commissioners. Well, we believe that the record is far greater than that. And we want to make sure that the entire robust set of information held by the Coastal Commission is in fact before the court.
Right, if I can just follow up real quick, if I may, Chair Adams. So I guess the queasiness that maybe some of us might be feeling is 6 months to get a record and another 6 to 10 months to fight over what the record should really be. That's disconcerting in the extreme. I don't know that there's much we can do about it. I did hear you say that you're prophylactically doing a PRA, but you know, oh man.
I'm not going to assuage your concerns. This is the type of case. It just as there's very little possibility of any settlement, there's very little possibility that the trial court decision will be the last step in this process, and thereafter we will go. One of the parties is very likely to take this to the appellate court. So whenever we have a trial court decision, you can go ahead and tack on another 18 months past that before there's a final decision. So hurry up and wait.
Got it.
Thank you, Mark. George?
Thank you.
Yeah, my question is a little bit like Mark's, but is Cal-Am a party to this process, and do they have a cost, piece of the cost of for preparing the record? And my main question is, are they in a position to delay their own actions in order to delay everything else.
CalAm is not yet a party. CalAm will have an opportunity to intervene. CalAm does not have the ability to delay the process, and no, CalAm would not bear the cost of the record because they are not contesting the decision. It will only be the parties that are contesting it, which is the City of Marina, Marina Coast Water District, and the Water Management Agency. The Water Management District.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Dave, are there any other questions or comments for our council?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, we will close that report and move on to now directors' reports. If there is any director who has had any trips that they would like to comment on regarding business with the agency or any conferences, attendance at meetings, etc. Mr. Riley and Paul.
Yes, there was a committee meeting of the Water Master. It was mainly at my request. I was trying to clarify some of the understandings that the Water Master is dealing with, the factual side of not only how they calculate contributions to the replenishment fund, but also what revenue sources does the Water Master think exist for dealing with issues of preserving, protecting the basin as not only as a water reservoir, but its potential to store water in the future. I mean, supply and reservoir. Anyway, so they've agreed to seek consultant assistance to pursue those questions. And I'm just reporting that, yeah, there's work to be done, and we'll have more to report probably later this year. But that meeting was in January, I believe.
Thank you. Alvin.
Thank you, Chair. I attended, like I said, listened to that Monterey One Water meeting with, I think Director Paul listened to it and a few others probably listened to it. I would like the district to consider having a meeting with Monterey One Water Recycle Committee and the our Water Supply Committee to see, can we come up with some kind of contingency and even include Marina Coast Water in that for this delay that we are having. I know we're going a legal route. I think we need to do something else on the physical route and come up and tell the public what we can do and what we cannot do and how much it's going to cost us. Prop 218s, if we have to go that route, I think we need to consider that and whatever. So I'm asking the board to give the Water Supply Committee a chance to go over to Recycle Water Committee at Monterey One and include Marina Coast and see what we can come up with, something physical that we can do on this big delay that we having. I think the public deserve to hear a contingency plan if we can't move further. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks very much for that, Alvin. Are there any other reports from directors about meetings, trips, or conferences? Karen, yes, sorry.
I attended the Monterey One Water meeting too for the same reason. I knew they were going to be discussing what I think of as the hostage situation. You know what I mean by that, the Pure Water Monterey and CalAm's refusal to sign the water purchase agreement for the expansion. And my intention was just to listen, but when they discussed it, how to put this, they seemed at a loss. They seemed without direction. They seemed without even ideas of what they could do about the situation. They seemed very uncertain, and there was what seemed to me a lack of leadership. Now, the one reason for all this is probably that they couldn't discuss legal strategy in open session, but I suspect that's not the only reason. So I spoke up and I suggested that their board and our board consider meeting in joint session to discuss, since we have shared the same interest in moving the expansion forward as does Marina Coastwater District. We want to move that forward. Let's talk about ways we might be able to do it. And I made it clear that this is an idea that just occurred to me individually, that we as our board had not discussed it. But since then, I think that Alvin's idea is a better place to start. The joint meeting of the committees, maybe with Marina Coast Water District, that'd be a good place to start. And depending on what comes of that meeting, our board might want to consider the idea of a joint meeting with the Monterey One Water Board, and maybe we could produce a joint strategy. And I'm sure we'd want advice from our general manager and our general counsel if we're going to consider something like that. But I wanted to fill you in on that part of that idea.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Director Paul. Any other comments at this point? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close item number 12, and we will move forward with a public hearing that we have, and that is going to be receiving our fiscal year 21-22 annual comprehensive financial report. And I believe that we have Suresh, who will open it up and set us up to hear from our auditors. And I'll turn it all over to you, Suresh. Thank you.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. As the Chair said, this is public hearing item number 13. We do have Ray Kaladi and Mike Briley from Clifton Larson Allen, previously Hayashi Well and Company. And Joel, would you please queue up my slides? We will have two sets of PowerPoint slides. I will do the numbers on the audit itself, and then Ray and Mike will go over the audit process itself. And talk about the findings and next steps in terms of GASB findings. So next slide, please. So established in '84, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, GASB, is the independent private sector organization, and this is the organization, the entity that establishes the accounting and financial reporting standards for U.S. state and local governments. And it follows the generally accepted accounting principles, or sometimes referred to as GAAP. So you'll see the two acronyms, GASB and GAAP, throughout the report itself. So I wanted to kind of like set that framework, what GASB is and what GAAP is. Next slide, please. So now we'll talk about ACFR. Used to be referred as CAFR about 2 years ago. The name changed from CAFR to ACFR. So what is a ACFR? It's a set of governmental financial statements comprising the financial report itself of the municipality that complies with the accounting requirements set by the GASB. And so our ACFR does meet the standards of GASB. And GASB, as I had mentioned, they are the agency, the entity that provides the standards for the content of what goes in the ACFR report. And they periodically do the update publications, sometimes more than a year, but generally about once a year. And as I had mentioned, the name changed from CAFR to ACFR. So now everywhere you'll see is ACFR, but 2 years ago, it was referred to as CAFR. Next slide, please. So the ACFR is compiled by the governmental accounting staff, which means the district staff, and then audited by the external certified accounting firm using the GASB requirements. In this case, it's Clifton Larson Allen. And the ACFR itself composed of 3 sections. One of them, you'll see the introductory section, which has the org chart, the list of board members, staff members. Then it has the financial section of the ACFR report, which basically has the numbers. And towards the end, you'll see the statistical sections, which basically has about 10 to 15 charts, and they basically have historical numbers. So you'll see those statistical sections have about 10 years of data. And like I said, all of those are set standards by the GASB. So we have to follow the guidelines set by GASB. Next slide, please. So these are the 3 sections that I was talking about. The introductory section in blue, you'll see where it says ACFR pages, Roman numeral I to IX. That's basically the actual page reference on our ACFR report. So when I say introductory, ACFA pages I through IX, that's where you'll find the introductory section in our report itself. As I had mentioned, introductory section has the letter of transmittal, the ACFA award letter, the government structure, which basically has the chart, the organization chart, the board member listing, the staff listing. The financial section has the auditor's opinion. It also has the management's discussion and analysis, or also referred to as MD&A. And then has the basic financial statements, which includes the financial statement notes as well. And then has the statistical section. Next slide, please. So as I had mentioned previously, district's financial statements have been audited by Clifton Larson. They are licensed certified public accountant. The auditor, Clifton Larson Allen in this case, has issued an unmodified clean opinion that the district's financial statements are fairly presented and it conforms with the GAAP. And the clean, unmodified opinion is the highest opinion you can get. So that's the one we've been getting for the last several years. Next slide, please. There were no matters involving internal control over financial reporting that they considered to be material weakness, and that's a good thing. There were no instances of non-compliance or reportable conditions that are required to be reported under the governmental auditing standards, and again, that's a good thing. And then the certificate of achievement for excellence in financial reporting that we've been applying for the last 7 years. I'm happy to report that the last 7 consecutive years we've been able to get the award. This year is presented and prepared. We will apply for the award again, and we are very confident that we will get the award this year as well. Next slide, please. Some numbers in the statement of net position, which is found in the ACFA report on page 13. The governmental activity, which is basically the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project, because the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project, the governmental activity is the district activities, and the business type activity, which is the column next to governmental, the middle column, that's the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project. Because we financed the Pebble Beach Reclamation Project, they are our component unit shown up on our audited financial statements. So you'll see in the ACFA report itself a section on Pebble Beach Reclamation report. And that's the reason why it's shown there, is because of the financing mechanism, because we issued the COP, the certificate of participation, under our name. And as a result of that, we have to report that entity on our books. So when we do the statement of net position, we do have to do our own governmental activity, which is the district activity itself. And then we also have to report the business type activity, which is the Pebble Beach. So that's basically a requirement that we have to do. So this page basically shows the assets and liabilities and the total net position at the end of the fiscal year. District activities were $23 million. The Pebble Beach reclamation was 36, and what's reported in the books is $60 million. Next page, please. This is the balance sheet, and this is only the governmental funds, and this is in comparison 2 years, which is basically comparing fiscal year ending 21 to fiscal year ending 22, but this is only on the district activities. So our total assets did increase from $21 million to $24 million. Our liabilities increased at the same time from 1.5 to 3. Deferred inflows are the journal entries that's done for the pension related entries. And then our total fund balance increased from $19.6 million to $21.3 million. So this is all on the district side of the books. And the detailed report on what I'm talking about here can be found on page 15 of the ACFA report. Next slide, please. This is the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes in fund balance. So this basically talks about the revenues itself, the expenses, and again, it's doing the comparison on the district activities only. So in fiscal year 21, we had $19.3 million. The total revenues for 22 was 23.6. The $4 million increase was predominantly due to the Pure Water Monterey project. In 21, we had billed the Pure Water Monterey project at about $6 million, and in 2022, it was about $10 million. So the $4 million increase on the revenue side was just for that. Total expenses, 17.8 in 21 compared to 21.8 in 22. So the net change in fund balance was 1.5 in 21 and 1.7 in 22. Then we have to bring in the beginning year fund balance, which is 19.6. You'll see that that's the 21 total year end fund balance. So that has to be shown as the beginning year fund balance. So our end of the year fund balance did increase from $19.6 million to $21 million. And again, all the detail of the line items can be found on page 16. Next slide, please. Just showing the district revenues in a graphical format, you will see about 41%. We say water sales, it's the PWM water sales. User fee makes about 25% of the revenue base. And then water supply about 14%, property tax about 10%, and there are some other small changes there. Next slide, please. And this is the district expenses. Again, it's just in a graphical format just to show the water purchase cost for the pure water Monterey was 44% of the total expenses. Project expenses was 27%, personal was 18%, operating expenses were 4%, and then some of the other ones like the professional fee, capital outlay, and debt service. Next slide, please. So this is the statement of revenue, expenses, and changes, what I talked about a couple of slides ago, but this is in comparison budget to actual. So what we had budgeted and what the actual numbers came up to. We had budgeted to be 24.4 on the revenue side, a little short, $23.6 million on the revenue side. On the expenses side, we had budgeted about $25.8 million, and we ended up spending $21.9 million. All in all, we had expected to use about $1.3 million from our fund balances, but that did not happen. Since you can see on the actual side, our net change in fund balance was a positive 1.4. Our revenues exceeded expenses, whereas when we did the budget, if everything materialized, the amount of money we collected, what we had budgeted for expenses, we would have had to spend about $1.3 million from our fund balance. So that's one of the reasons why on the earlier slides, I said our fund balance did go up. And that's one of the reasons why is basically our revenues exceeded our expenses. And again, the detailed revenue to budget numbers can be found on pages 52 through 54. Next slide, please. This is the pension and OPEB liabilities. On the pension side, you'll see our beginning of the year, which means our closing balance from fiscal year 21 was $6 million. Net change in obligation dropped down for the pension side, $2.4 million. So the end of the year obligation stood at $3.5 million. The biggest change why the $2.4 million drop was because PERS made a significant earnings about 2 years ago, like 21.4% rate of return, when the expected rate of return was 7%. And so you can imagine they did exceed the rate of return about 3 times is what was expected. So it basically everybody got the liabilities did go down for everybody because of the market value of assets that they got such a favorable rate of return. On the other post-employment benefits, the district does offer a retiree health medical after post-retirement for employees. And so that's why we have to do the other post-employment benefits, or sometimes referred to as OPEB. Our beginning of the year balance was $4.5 million, net change in obligation. And this is basically the demographical change for the employees. So basically we're looking at the age, new employees coming in, older employees are receiving the benefit. So the actuarials do the number calculation for that. So that ended up going up about $500,000. So that stands at about $5 million now, end of fiscal year 22. So all in all, our total beginning of the year was 10.5. Net change was minus 1.9. So our outstanding obligation for pension and OPEB stands at $8.5 million at the end of fiscal year. And again, the detailed report can be found from pages 40 to 47. Next slide, please. So staff recommends that the board receive the fiscal year 21-22 annual comprehensive report. But at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Clifton Larson, and they have a short presentation as well to go over the audit details. Over to you, Ray. And Joel, could you please cue up their slides?
Thank you, Suresh. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So I think everyone has met Ray Goulardi. Ray will help me in the presentation today. Suresh did a very good job, very thorough. So we'll be very brief respect to the agenda. I think first of all, if we could put the slides up on the screen. Thank you, Joel. Appreciate it. Yeah, so I want to just touch on one thing Suresh mentioned. You may not recognize the name Clifton Larson Allen. CLA is what they go by. So Hayashi and Wayland, who I'm one of the partners of the firm. We've been owned and operated independently here in Monterey County for almost 50 years. We decided to join Clifton Larson Allen in November. So effective November 1, we became part of Clifton Larson Allen. CLA is what I'll continue to refer to them as. They're a national firm. They have a lot of expertise in governmental accounting area. They also have expertise in some of our other industries and locally. We do a lot of work in nonprofit, as you may know, and agriculture as well. So they were a really good fit for us. So we're happy to be a part of their team and present this report on behalf of them. The next slide, just as a brief overview of what we'll cover. Suresh touched on these things. We'll go over them very briefly again, our auditor's report, and then what we're required to communicate to all of you who are in charge of governance over the district. Ray will cover that, and some accounting updates and an update on recommendations. So next slide. As Suresh mentioned, you hire us as your auditors to render an opinion on whether the financial statements of the district are fairly presented in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. That's in essence what you're hiring us as auditors to do. We do a lot of other work as well, but it all comes down to a deliverable in the form of this audit opinion. So we're very pleased to say that you did receive an unmodified opinion, as Suresh mentioned, which is the highest level of assurance you can receive from your auditor. So really want to compliment Suresh and all of his team and David. These types of opinions are a result of the work that your team puts in, and you wouldn't have that if it wasn't for them. So I want to recognize their effort and also just their cooperation throughout the audit process. So thank you, Suresh and David and your team. Okay, Ray, I'll pass it to you, and you can touch on some of the communication points.
So you can go to advance the slide. Here we go, and go ahead and go again. This is just our required communications that we have to make with the board. And you actually have a letter that spells it out in more of a narrative format, but here it is, just kind of concise, some bullet points of what we go over each year. There weren't any new significant accounting policies that were changed or adopted during the year, other than the accounting pronouncement for leases was implemented. And that is something we wanted to highlight, because that is part of the delay this year in getting the audit report completed, is the lease implementation is quite a cumbersome task of actually having to pull and get contracts for every lease and obligation that the district pays on a monthly basis. And there's a lot of leases that they're small leases, but they happen month to month, where the contracts are 25, 30 years old, and, you know, trying to track those down and make sure that we understood the terms and whether they could be canceled or not. So we had to get a lot of those leases, and you'll see it on the next slide that it ended up not having a significant impact to the district's financial statements. So we actually ended up passing on an adjustment for that, but that was a big part of the audit process this year to implement that standard. Any of the accounting estimates that are in the financial statements, we deem those to be reasonable. And that's pretty much the pension and OPEB type estimates that need to be made to come up with those liabilities, as well as the useful lives on your fixed assets. We didn't have any disagreements with management throughout the audit process, and there weren't any significant or unusual transactions where we didn't have authoritative guidance on how to record those. Go to the next slide. We're required to disclose if you had made other consultations with other accountants, like you didn't like our opinion on something, or you had to go out and get a different opinion on how to record something. That didn't happen. And as far as the journal entries go, this is where we're required to disclose what changes would have been made to the financial statements that you would have been receiving at your normal, monthly meetings. So we made a total of 4 adjusting journal entries that decreased your net position by about $453,000. That is primarily due to one entry, and that has to do with the $500,000 that you guys lent Reclamation Project $1 million 2 years ago. They paid back $500,000. For your internal purposes, that's revenue, but for the audited financials, it gets offset with, it's called an internal balance, and it just offsets with the payment from the business type activities from the project. So really, there wasn't a significant adjustment to your books if it weren't for that one internal transaction. Then we also made 2 GASB or journal entries, which related to the pension and OPEB, which Suresh went over. There was some substantial changes in the actuarial assumptions. So that did change the liabilities there. And then we made or required to disclose if there's a misstatement that we didn't correct. And so once we evaluated all of the leases, there would have been about a $27,000 adjustment. We would have had to record a right to use asset, amortize it, do present value on the payments and break those out in a different way, and came to the conclusion that was just too immaterial for the process that it was going to take over the next years to get that, recorded. So you're just recording the leases as you have been in the past. It's just going through your as expenses as they're being paid. We didn't have any difficulties performing the audit, and as Suresh noted, we didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies that we identified as part of our audit. Next slide. And then you can go in advance. So for the accounting updates, you actually implemented, or what we would call adopted, these 4 pronouncements, but the only one that would have had an impact was the GASB 87 for leases. The other ones didn't really impact the district at all. So we didn't have to make any required disclosures other than as part of the annual comprehensive financial report, you're required to list all of the pronouncements that are out there that could have been adopted or not. So if you advance to the next slide, these are all of the upcoming pronouncements that the GASB has issued. And really the only potential impact that I see currently would be the last 2. If there was an accounting change for an error correction, which we don't see being an issue, but there's going to be some changes in how compensated absences are recorded. So that'll be upcoming in a couple of years. And then as far as recommendations go, you can go ahead and advance. This is where we're good. We didn't have any current year issues that we needed to disclose to the management or to the board for internal control weaknesses that we identified, whether it was a control deficiency or significant or material weakness. We didn't have any. And any of the prior year or even previous years to last year's recommendations that have been mentioned in the past have been addressed and corrected. So we don't have any current year recommendations. And that's the audit in brief, and then just have it open to any questions that you may want to ask.
Thank you both very much, Ray and Mike. And Suresh, thank you so much. You as well, Dave, but I think one of the reasons why we're doing so well is because of the diligence with which you approach the auditing process and all of the accounting works. Thank you so much, Suresh. And I will now go out to my directors, and the first is George, and then we have Mark Eisenhardt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a simple question. I think it was reported earlier, 6 months or a year ago. I don't know, sure. We were pretty much at the end of the relationship with Pebble Beach Reclamation Project. And I didn't know whether the paperwork for that will also close some part of the books on that. And will that change? Will it change the financing picture of the district much? I mean, how does that, if it's ending, does that mean the paperwork is also ending or the accounting is ending?
We've had that up for discussion, and we're actually going to spend a little bit more time investigating that just to make sure, because you're right. When you issue the certificates of participation, that's what made it a requirement that we consolidated the project onto your books, and those will be paid off as of July 1st, 2023. I believe is the payoff date. So we are going to look.
Right, it was already paid July 1, 2022. So
July 1, 2022. Yeah, it was all current. So we know that it was all current on the books. So we're going to look into that to determine whether that would mean that would no longer become a component unit of the water district. There's more than just the accounting for it. We don't want to unwind something that then turn around that you end up putting back on because you lend more money to the project. So we're going to spend a little bit more time looking into that for Suresh and Dave, and get back to them as to what we think we need to do with that. But if it were to come off, it would just mean that you would report your governmental activities, and the business type activities would no longer be reported.
But from the standpoint of where do we go from here? You know, it has been pointed out, we're starting to look as the reclamation project to look at a 20-year or longer capital financing program. And many of those items can be done through building up reserves for renewal and replacement. But there are some large ticket items, you know, 10 and 15 years out that might require debt. And the entire structure that we have treating them as an enterprise of the district is because we sold the water through an installment sale arrangement, which created the security for the certificates of participation. So you wouldn't want to necessarily undo it if you think you're going to need that same financing tool 10 years down the road. And then the other thing that happened was we were able, through our reserves, to lend the project money that was just mentioned, you know, $1 million for the tank rehabilitation. That looked like an interfund borrowing on our books, but it also was kind of a lesson to the participants. You know, keep in mind, it's Carmel Area Wastewater District owns and operates the project. Pebble Beach Community Service District owns and operates the distribution system and the storage. And Monterey Peninsula Water Management District owns the water in the other people's pipes and sells it to the golf courses. And so that arrangement has worked, but we've been able to step up on a couple occasions and, you know, pay as you go and then get repaid. And so there may not be any good reason to disband the group and just keep the same four parties in place. But Ray is right. She's been tasked with looking at whether we need to keep it as a component element of our financial reporting, because if we can make it go away, but we don't change any of our contractual relationships and then bring it back later, there will be some savings on the annual audit costs, but it'll be a little cleaner.
Thank you.
Okay, Mark?
Thanks, Chair Adams. I got two questions. First one's for Suresh. So on the OPEB, which obviously these are very important benefits for our district's employees, and I certainly understand the actuarial analysis for an annual estimate for, you know, a target. But do we have any sense, do we have any projections going past 1 year about what our OPEB liabilities are looking like they're going to be, if there's based on the data we have about our staff and, you know, our employees, is there a prediction that over the next year, 2, 3, 4, or 5, that there could be some sharp changes on that? And then I have a second question for Ray.
Yeah, Director Eisenhardt, we do have what's called the GSP 75 report, the actuarial report performed by GovInvest, and that does project the liability for the next 5 years. I can offline, I can send it over to you.
That'd be great. I mean, but I'm just curious if you know off the top of your head, are there any sharp?
There wasn't a sharp, right? There wasn't a sharp increase, anything. It's pretty much leveled. But basically, as I had mentioned, the demographic employee data. I mean, what happens on the actual GSP 75 calculation is that they refresh the calculation every year with just the numbers that they have from prior year, and then every 2 years they run the calculation again with new employee demographic data. So every 2 years the report gets refreshed by the number of actual employees we have and how many people have taken off and started using the benefit. Keep in mind, one thing is, even though the benefit is there, that doesn't mean that everybody takes it. We've had about 2 employees that retired over the last 3 years. They never touched the benefit. They never take the benefit. So even though we were projecting as a liability, but it never materialized. So when those employees dropped off, the liability dropped off. So it's kind of like a moving number, but they do give us an indication when they run the calculation for 5 years, and it's not a big spike increase.
And when that report and the PERS report come out, it's usually the end of the calendar year, around November, I believe. We do make those available to the board.
Yeah, we do a presentation to the board.
And then, sorry.
No, I was just gonna say that OPEB liability is their estimate of the total liability for your current active retirees. So yeah, it doesn't know if you end up with 10 more retirees, you know, obviously that liability will go up, but currently that's the projection for all the retirees of the district.
And then, Ray, I have a question for you. It's a silly one, but
Yeah.
So the uncorrected restatement, statement regarding leases, and you mentioned about a $27,000
Yes.
issue. And sort of there was a judgment call. Okay, it's not significant. It would, to go back in time and to project forward all of the things you need to do, wouldn't be doing. But it does look like a little tiny demerit on our on our. And so my question is this: This is the question. Are we done with that? In other words, when we do the audit next year or the next time, it doesn't show up again because we've already categorized it as a, you know, do we not need to see it every year after this?
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping. I'm going to follow up on that one because you're right. We could say, oh, well, now if we had amortized it, it would be a $24,000 adjustment. So I don't think we need to repeat it. It's immaterial to your financial statements. But what you do have to remember is if you enter into any new leases, now we're talking something different. So primarily the impact of that 27,000 is your copier leases, because those are committed long-term contracts that you have to make payments for. So when those expire and you enter into a new one, we would have to apply this standard where it's capitalized as a right to use asset, and then we present value the payments.
All right, Suresh, I tried. I had your back, man. I'm trying to keep this thing.
Yeah, just imagine the cities that have hundreds of leases, what they went through with this gas announcement.
Yeah.
Understood. Thanks, Ray. Thanks, Suresh.
Great. Okay, then now we'll go to Alvin and then Karen.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Suresh, Director Eisenhart just hit on something. I read in here, you're going to resubmit for the award to get the award if we can get it, because we got a good track record going and we need to keep that good track record going if we're ever going to become a water company on the finance side. So are you going to resubmit the award or is that going to hurt us on that?
No, it won't hurt us, Director Edwards. We feel confident that we will get the award again, because what we did was we did comply with prior year findings when we submitted it to GFOA for award. So every year when they go through the award, if they find anything wrong with the financial statements, little tweaks here and there, they do recommend those, and we address those when we prepare the financial statement. So we feel highly confident that we will get the award for this year as well.
Okay, thank you. And good job to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alvin. And now I'll go to Karen.
You're on mute.
Could you unmute yourself, Karen? Thanks.
Sorry. First question is about has to do with the timing of this report. The draft appears to have been written in the summer, right? And so there's a lot of statements of fact in the report, in the draft, that I'm sure were accurate when it was written, but are now out of date. So is the plan to update those facts? So for example, it says that the CalAm's efforts to obtain a coastal permit have been unsuccessful. And, you know, that changed in November. And there's there are other statements like that that are now out of date. I have a list. I can give you more, but it's probably not necessary. So is the plan to update things like that?
No, Director Paul, what happens, you have to keep in mind the audit is dated June 30th, 2022. And so this is the audit fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022. And what you're referring to is basically in the letter of transmittal that we submitted with the CAFA report, with the ACFA report, sorry. So at that point in time, it's a snapshot. So that's what the statements were at that point in time.
So I guess it confused me because I didn't see a date on the letter or the draft report. I mean, I understand the period ended in June.
Yeah, the date has to be, and Ray, you can help me with this. The date has to be a time when the legal opinion comes in, and it's certain days, so many days before the legal opinion, right, Ray? So the date's going to be current. But when people reading the financial statement, they will have to refer to the date that the financial report is for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2022.
Right.
Yes.
So it doesn't matter that the narrative, well, I guess it's the letter of transmittal that information is out of date. That does not.
Trying to see where that's listed.
It's sort of not out of date because it's going to be a new year that we're talking about. So I wouldn't consider it out of date.
Well, it's not the, I understand that the period audited ended at the end of June, and that information, nothing needs to be updated there, but it's just the description of facts. I guess it is in the letter of transmittal that explains context. That's what's out of date. It may not matter, but just a question.
Yeah, because for the audit, the only place we would put anything that would be subsequent to June is there's a subsequent events footnote that if there was something that was material that we thought the readers needed to understand would be in that subsequent event footnote.
I see. Okay.
And then we wait for, again, what Suresh was talking about, the date. We do wait till we get the legal letters from the attorneys just to verify that there's no ongoing legal issues that need to be disclosed.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Yeah, that's why on the, Director Paul, just to kind of like give another reference, if you look at the board member listing, you'll see that the old board members are listed on there, the old board members that were effective in place as of June 30th, 2022. But if you look at the date when the audit report is signed, you have new, totally different board members. So it's basically what the fiscal year ending is referencing to, and that's how we have to kind of like lay out the framework for the actual report itself.
Thank you. Got it. Okay. The Walter, this is again, a few questions about just about some of the facts. The Walter Properties and the Moo Land Company, this was one of the exemption events described. Just where are those properties?
Yeah, Walter is the lots across from the Quail Lodge hotel property and behind the hay and feed. So kind of riverfront to the hay and feed along Carmel Valley Greens Drive. And then Moo Lands Company is way at the top of the hill. Stephanie, I don't know if you're listening, but
yeah, it's up on the south side of Carmel Valley Village.
Okay.
Yeah, way at the top.
All right. Thank you. And then I noticed that in the description of the assets, water reserves are one of the types of assets, and the value increased from one period to another, and was wondering if the increase was due to increase in quantity or increase in price or a combination.
Quantity.
Yeah, quantity. We put a couple hundred additional acre feet in during the fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
And we don't mark that to market, correct, Ray? It goes in based on its cost.
Based on the cost.
Yeah.
Okay. And the rest of my questions have been answered, so thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Paul. Any other board members with questions or comments for our auditors today? Okay, with that, this is a public hearing, and I believe that we have recommended action that we'll need to take.
We do have one member of the public who wants to comment.
Thank you so much for seeing that. I'm sorry that I missed it. Okay, and let's just see who we have here. It looks like it may be Tom Raleigh.
When you're ready, please present your comment.
Try to unmute. Good evening. One of the things that you mentioned about legal questions and, $27,000 on a lease agreement. There's the court case on the water supply charge ordinance 152. I'd like to know whether the accountants were briefed on this case. The initial motions were filed during last fiscal year, during the time of this report, and I heard no mention of it. I like to feel reassured that this report takes into account that I read 14% of the income for the fiscal year 21-22 was from the water supply charge. It's not inconceivable that the Superior Court could say, you no longer will receive that income. I did not hear that mentioned, and this legal case was started and was initial hearings and motions were filed last year during the fiscal year that's being covered by this report. So I would like to question whether the accountants were briefed on this. Thank you.
I can reply to that. So yes, that is part of what we will get in the response from general counsel when they reply to their legal letter. We review it each year and make sure whether or not where the action is at. If there's any cost that we need to accrue to the district, that would be one final adjustment that would be a potential. In the past, there has not been any action taken that would have any expense needing to be accrued. So we have to wait till we get that attorney letter before this report's final.
Thanks for your response, Ray. I'm not seeing any other hands raised.
That's correct.
Okay, all right, with that, I will entertain a motion to receive the annual comprehensive financial report for 21-22.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second? I think Karen Paul seems to be saying second. So
I was trying.
yes, so we'll have a motion by
You got this,
Director
Karen.
Riley, second by Director Paul. Could we please have a roll call vote? Joelle?
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes,
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes,
Chair Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. With that, that motion passes, and we will close the public hearing and go over to our action items. This evening, we have three action items that we will be identifying. And the first thing we will do is call on Stephanie Locke to give a presentation on item number 14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this item is to consider adopting a resolution to declare March 20th through 26th Fix a Leak Week in the Monterey Peninsula Water Management District. And Joelle, are we ready with the PowerPoint? So this is always a fun presentation for me because Fix a Leak Week has a lot of activities that can be undertaken, and the district has some interesting links on our montereywaterinfo.org website. Next, please. So every year, the Environmental Protection Agency does a Fix a Leak Week. And basically, this encourages households to get everybody involved, looking for different places that can save water. The household leaks can waste nearly 1 trillion gallons of water annually nationwide. So this is a very important reminder for people to be aware of where their water might be disappearing. So the annual Fix a Leak Week is March 20th through 26th. But of course, we always encourage people to keep their eyes open for leaks and fix them promptly all year long. Next. So I'm going to go through a couple of just quick things people can do to help themselves with checking for leaks. Ideally, you want to identify the source of the leak and then obviously get it fixed. So the first thing you'd want to do is check your water meter. And you can look at your water meter before and then after a 2-year period and don't use any water in that time. And if the meter has changed at all, there's probably a leak.
Yeah, 2 hour, correct.
2 hour, yes. Next. The Water District and CalAm also offer these free leak detection kits, which are essentially some dye tablets that can be placed in the toilet tank. And you put those in the tank and then wait for 15 minutes. And if there's color in the bowl after that time, then you have a leak. And usually if that's the case, it's either the flapper is not functioning correctly or the fill level on the tank is higher than it should be, and it's filling up and just continually running. Next. So the toilet flappers are just cheap rubber parts, and they can build up minerals and decay over time. They either get old or they just wear out because the rubber degrades. And replacing a flapper is a very easy fix for the toilet. You always want to take your old flapper with you if you can. So shut the water off at the toilet, remove the flapper and take it with you just to make sure that you have the correct one. Or if you know what the model number of the toilet is, that also is helpful. The district has universal flappers available for free. So you can come by and pick one up if you'd like. If you end up purchasing a new toilet flapper and you live in the water management district, you can get a rebate. I think it's up to $15 for a toilet flapper. Next. Faucets. Old and worn faucet washers and gaskets also can wear out over time and cause leaks. There are many YouTube and other tutorials online to show you how to fix a different variety of faucets. And the do-it-yourself network, DIY network, also has a lot of handy references on how to do these replacements. And it's actually a pretty easy fix. The district also offers free faucet aerators. So if you'd like to come by and pick one of those up, you can do that as well. Next. Shower heads. So leaky shower heads can be fixed primarily by making sure that there's a tight connection between the shower head and the pipe stem, and highly suggest always using pipe tape when you secure it, and that helps to prevent leakage. Pipe tape is a Teflon tape, and it's available at most hardware stores. So not really a tape, but it's just a white tape-like substance that you wrap around the pipe when you put it together. For more complicated valve leaks in showers that drip when it's not in use, you probably need to contact a handy person or licensed plumber to take care of it. Again, with shower heads are offered free of charge at both the district and CalAM's offices. Next. Outside. So if you have an in-ground irrigation system, be sure to check it every spring before you use it to make sure it wasn't damaged. A lot of times we see the drip emitters popping off and just shooting out water from time to time. It's especially obvious at this time of year and also in the late fall and early spring. If you're driving around, you may see irrigation systems that are have a problem and they've leaked on the road. We want to make sure that we know about those. So if you see that, please contact the district and let us know. And we'll let the property owner know that they may have a problem. You might want to hire an irrigation professional that's certified by WaterSense to inspect your irrigation for you. And then also be sure to check your garden hose for leaks at its connection to the spigot, or perhaps it might have a, occasionally they wear out, they have holes. If it leaks while you run your hose, you can replace the nylon or rubber washer and then make sure it has a tight connection. And you can again use pipe tape and a wrench to make it very secure. Next. So if you have leaks and you find that these solutions aren't enough to stop them, it might be time to replace your leaking fixtures. So the Water Management District, in partnership with CalAM, offers a number of very progressive rebates. And when looking for fixtures, make sure that they have the WaterSense label, and that will guarantee that you're getting a product that that the EPA and the district stand behind. Information on rebates can be found at our MontereyWaterInfo.org website. Next. So this evening, the recommendation to the board is to adopt Resolution 2023-03, declaring the week of March 20th through 26th to be Fix a Leak Week in the Monterey Water District. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Are there any questions from the board on this presentation today? Yes, Amy.
I have a quick question, Stephanie. Thank you, Mary. Do you have an idea of how much volume is saved every year, or an average or something from fix a leak week? Is there any way to measure that? Do you know that this is actually happening?
I think that in general, obviously, quantifying leaks is difficult because some are little tiny leaks and some are really big leaks. The concept really is to try to bring awareness to the community and remind people to check things. So I don't know that we can quantify anything, but certainly want to remind the community, and especially as we move from winter into spring with the irrigation systems, that to me is one of the biggest things I see all the time are leaky irrigation systems.
I guess really what I should have asked is do you get a lot of activity with the interaction with the public, so you know that they're engaged?
We get a lot of interaction all the time just because the springtime moves into where we start doing a lot of events. And so we're providing information, we're providing equipment to people to help save water. So yeah, I would say definitely it's kind of the kickoff to the season of people being more aware of how their water is used.
I'm glad they participate. Thank you.
Thank you. George?
Yeah, thanks, Mary. The rebate program does have an estimated savings of water. And I know the district keeps that numbers. I've seen it periodically, but that's part of the answer, I think. It's not just leak week. It's just what we do to support reduced water use. And you do have estimates. I've seen estimates, but I don't remember what they are.
It's actually the item 22 in your packet tonight, the Water Conservation Program report, has a table at the end. Actually, it's an exhibit today. That lists the rebates that were issued and quantifies savings that we're able to quantify. But there are a number of rebates that we don't actually have quantifiable savings on. So, but that is provided to the board every month.
Are there any other board members with questions, comments? I think at this point I do need to take it out to the public. Is there any member of the public that wishes to comment on this item?
Sarah Adams, Sarah, could you share the timer?
And I think we have Tom Rowley.
That's correct.
You're on, Tom.
Yes, good evening again. Great report, Stephanie. As a property manager for about 40 years in the Monterey Peninsula, I've got to tell you, one of the major causes of faucet leaks is too much water pressure. And that's usually an indicator that there's problems with the pressure regulator. We do have a lot of areas where over a period of time, as water mains are replaced, where we get surges in pressure or increases in pressure that people didn't previously have. And that's happened to me in properties that I've managed. One was in Marina in particular, but anyway, we were able to fix it when we figured out that it was an increase in pressure, and somewhere about 75 to 70 pounds PSI at the street is enough. Otherwise, you're putting you're like a ticking time bomb inside the house. So I would like to suggest, I don't know whether this already is accountable, but somehow take into account that people can take and check their water pressure, because that's usually what causes, you can fix the leak at the faucet, and then the next weak part of the system will fail. So that's just a quick suggestion that has saved much water at various properties I've managed over the years. Thank you.
Thank you for that really interesting comment, Tom. Excellent. Thank you. Okay, any other hands raised?
Madam Chair?
I see no raised hands, so I'll return this back to the board.
Stephanie?
I would actually like to respond to that. Tom, thank you very much for bringing that up. It has been on my to-do list as one of one of our last low hanging fruits for water savings to undertake a water pressure regulator program. And that is something that is in our budget for this year. I'm not sure if I'll get it off the ground or not before July. But what people do need to know is that the water pressure in the CalAm system and other systems fluctuates greatly depending on where the property is. And most properties have a small, like bell-shaped water pressure regulator between the water meter and the house or the business. And they're often put in and then forgotten. And those devices do fail over time. They do need to be serviced or replaced. And so that is something that I do want to look at, and this should be a presentation for later this year as far as a new program for us. But if you do find that your water pressure is really high, your toilets won't function at the way they're at the low water use they're supposed to function at, your shower heads will be flowing higher than they're supposed to. It can actually blow out your ice makers and dishwashers and things like that because the pressure is too high. It's kind of like having high blood pressure. And so checking to make sure your water pressure is under control is another really, really good way of saving water. So thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Stephanie. Any other comments? I see, we understand we have two people with their hands raised. Tom, is that a legacy hand?
I believe so.
Yes. And then
Sarah,
we have
could you share
Tammy
the
Jennings.
timer?
Tammy Jennings.
Yeah, I just, this is very interesting to me about the water pressure. And you're saying it's a bell-shaped unit. Where would I look for that and how would I test it? Is there a meter on it, a reader or something? That's my only question is how do I check that? Thank you.
Thank you for your question.
Would you like me to respond to that?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, usually it is located, like I said, between the meter and the house. Sometimes they might be buried. And unfortunately, you're not going to see that. The best thing to do is you can get a water pressure meter, which is just kind of a small device at the hardware store, and it screws onto the hose bib outside the house. And you turn on the hose bib and it'll measure the pressure. And as Tom Rowley mentioned, you know, ideally you want to be below 70 would be ideal for the number that you get on that meter. If it's higher than that, in some places are as high as 150 around here, you definitely need to do something to reduce the pressure. And that would be calling a plumber and having a pressure regulating device installed or repaired.
Great. Stephanie, I think you have a lot of people who are going to be interested in the presentation that we hope you'll be able to give on water pressure. It sounds like there's a lot of interest in it. So thank you so much for your presentation. And I think that will be a very interesting one. Okay, with that, moving on, I believe that we need to take a vote on accepting the adoption of Fix a Leak Week. So if I could have a motion to approve.
I move.
Thank you, Amy. And a second.
Oglesby second.
Okay, thank you, Ian. So please, if we could have a roll call vote.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Riley,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes,
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye, thank you very much. And now let's just jump right into item 15, which sounds like a very similar resolution that we will adopt, but this time it's to add a rebate for smart toilet leak detectors.
And Stephanie, before you do, Stephanie, spinning off a comment that was raised on the last item, last calendar year, so 2022, things that we can measure, we did 642 rebates at just over $248,000 worth of rebate expense. And that savings was permanent 6.858, or call it 7 acre-feet per year going forward. So there is impact from all these things that Stephanie's people do.
Thank you so much for that, Dave. Okay, back to you, Stephanie.
All right, thank you. So this item is consider the adoption of resolution 2023-03, amending the rebate amounts table to add a rebate for smart toilet leak detectors. And Joelle, are we ready to go? And we can go to the next slide, please. So what are smart toilet leak detectors? They're devices that are attached to a toilet that are connected into a smart network and they notify maintenance personnel via text or computer in the event that a leak is detected. This is primarily addressed toward the large installations of toilets, so visitor serving facilities like hotels, conference centers, that kind of thing, and also to apartment buildings and condominiums that are on master water meters, where they may not be able to tell that there's a leak taking place in a unit. And so this device actually will provide notification so that the leak can be repaired. And a great follow-up to the adoption of Fix a Leak Week. Next, please. So the proposed rebate is a rebate for the installation of 20 or more toilet leak detector units in apartments, condos, or visitor serving commercial facilities. The rebate would be 25% of the cost of the individual monitoring device, with a maximum rebate of $15,000 for those devices. Both the Water Demand Committee and the Finance and Administration Committee unanimously recommended adding this rebate for non-residential smart toilet leak detectors. And as was mentioned, I think previously here, but it's a complementary rebate to the previously approved rebate for smart flow meters. Back about 2 years ago, the board adopted a rebate for smart flow meters, which are devices either attached at the meter or near the house for residential uses. It could also be used in commercial uses, but what we've seen is it's primarily been for people's houses. It provides, a smart flow meter provides an electronic sensor that can be, you can get online and see what's happening in your home and seeing where water's being used and when it's being used. So while this is not directed at residential uses, this rebate is kind of similar in the sense that it will provide information about leaks that may occur in hotel rooms or apartments where people are not necessarily watching for those leaks. Next. So the recommendation this evening is that the board adopt resolution 2023-03 to add a rebate for 25% of the cost of 20 or more smart leak detector units installed in visitor serving or master metered multifamily residential sites to a maximum rebate of $15,000. Adoption of this resolution will amend the rebate table, and this rebate is supported by CalAM, and staff will work with CalAM to help notify the customers that could qualify for this. And that would be, like I said, primarily hotels and visitor serving facilities, as well as apartment buildings. Anyway, that's the recommendation.
Thank you very much. I see that we have Mark Eisenhardt, hand raised.
Oh, yeah. Sort of embarrassed by this, Stephanie, because we had a long conversation about this last week and we all were excited about it. But now I have a question. Good thing we have a process here, I guess. And I don't know if you're able to answer it or maybe Dave Stoll or Dave Laredo, but it's the issue of the site, SITE. I don't know where that is in the larger scheme of the ordinances, but if the property is a hotel with 3 buildings, right? Is each building a site for the same hotel? Or is site, I don't mean to be technical, but that turns 15,000 cap to 45, right? So if there were 3 buildings, anyway, I know that.
Excellent question. So
yes.
as a new director, this is a good one. You'll find in my staff reports, and I think I'm probably the only one that does this, but anytime we have a defined term that's defined in Rule 11, which is definitions, I will capitalize that term for you. So that's where you'll find the answer to the site. And it would be one or more contiguous parcels that are owned under identical ownership.
I see.
So they may have 5 buildings, they're still capped at $15,000.
All right. And then if conversely, I see this in what I do for a living, I see this very often, that sophisticated real estate holders, when they have multiple parcels, even though they're the same person, they have different entities for each parcel to try to divvy up liability. And if that were the case, if it was XYZ LLC for this parcel and ABC LLC for this parcel, even though it's the same managing member, they would then get 15,000 for each parcel.
You are correct.
So they could work the system a little bit there. Not
They could, and I have not ever seen that happen. So.
Just curious.
Yeah.
Now you will. It's public meeting.
I've seen the opposite, where people have put them all into one name so that they could have a site, but not to actually
Right.
split.
Well, even
I think
it's not
in
that
this
much
case,
money.
yeah, if we discovered an example like that, we'd probably attempt to use the powers of moral suasion to convince them to not game the system. But
well, and I just want to add separately, unrelated to that discussion. It was a good conversation we had last week, and for the public, and the other impetus here, I think that's probably a lot greater than the $15,000 cap is the profit margin. I mean, if you can stop these leaks, and water is so expensive, the hotel or other large capacity site is going to save a lot of money. It's just a really good idea all around. So,
And like I said, Callan totally supports this as well. So it's.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. George Riley.
Yeah, along those same lines, I noticed in the annual financial report, deep into the report, in the statistical section, actually page 72 out of 73 pages. On page 72 is a summary of water consumption by category over the past 9 or 10 years, from 2012 to 2021. And it shows a reduction in use, and this is by in acre feet, shows a reduction in residential properties use. It shows a reduction in commercial properties. It does not show a reduction in multi-residential. So my question with this rebate, will it be marketed? And maybe it's pretty popular already, but I'm just curious how to get the word out and maybe exhaust the the rebate, but also make it more popular, because like Mark said, and even like your presentation, there are benefits throughout the community.
Thank you, Director Riley. Yes. So interestingly, as I mentioned, I'll work with CalAm to get the information out there. We do have a mailing list for all those large apartment buildings. But on that report that you're referring to, the multifamily housing that's reported as multifamily are only those units that are on a master meter. So those are the ones that we would be targeting by this rebate. Apartment buildings that have individual meters for each unit are not reported as a multifamily unit. So that's exactly where we're going to go, is target those people.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much for that report. Let's take it out to the public and see if there's any member of the public who wishes to comment or ask questions on this item. I'm not seeing any hands raised. How about you, Joel?
That's correct.
Okay, great. With that, we will then close this item. And I think we have to bring it back, since we are adopting a resolution, bring it back for a vote. Do we have a motion to approve?
I move.
I see Eisenhardt. Is there a second?
Second,
I see Anderson. Okay, could we please have a roll call vote?
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
Aye.
Director Paul, Director Riley,
Aye.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
going back to Director Paul,
Yes.
Vice Chair Anderson,
yes,
Chair Adams.
Aye. Okay, thank you with that. And now we will move on to item number 16, which is to receive the 2022 ordinance number 152 Oversight Panel Annual Report. And we will
Yes.
turn to our general manager.
Yes, and this report, I think, pretty much speaks for itself. But the goal here is the action is to vote to receive the report. The report is non-binding on the board. And what you'll see as you read it is it's representative of the key issues that the panel has been addressing or discussing this year. We've elected to show a majority view and a minority view because there is a schism on the board over certain of these issues. The primary issues, without getting into great detail, is the desire or lack of desire to sunset all or a portion of the water supply charge. There is a concern that because the Mechanics Bank loan, originally Rabobank loan, has a specific pledged security of the water supply charge, that there may be a drive or a desire to pay that loan off. It does have a balloon payment this coming June 30th. So we will be presenting options to the board as well as to this panel. The third is, should Measure J costs be borne at all by the water supply charge through the three different cost centers, mitigation, water demand, and water supply. Measure J costs could conceivably be placed into the water supply area. And then finally, there is a financial report attached, as well as some bullet points on the types of projects that have been funded through the water supply charge. I think it's a pretty good track record, but it is there for you to receive, just so you understand the opinions of the panel. There are two panel members participating as attendees, so they may or may not have anything to say. And I will leave it at that.
Thank you very much for that, General Manager. Any member of the board who has any questions or comments? Yes, Supervisor.
I would just like to thank the members, the people who are serving on the committee. And I think I saw 3 of them who are in attendance, if I'm not mistaken, but in any event, I want to thank all of them for serving. That's all.
Thank you, Karen. And thank you for your service on the committee some time ago. Thank you. Alvin, your hand is up.
Thank you, Chair. General Manager, could you give us a quick overview of how many members on this committee?
Right. There are 9 members. 1 appointed by the Monterey County Association of Realtors, 1 appointed by the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association, and then 1 each appointed by every director.
Okay, and in the future, I'd like for us to put up what projects they are talking about or we are talking about. I listened to that meeting and looked in that meeting that day that you had it, and y'all did an outstanding job. I like how you report, you write the report, the minority and those 2 right there, very good. So I commend you on your report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Riley.
I read the report with interest. I thought it was a factual report, which I was glad to see, and not necessarily opinion, except for the the majority and minority opinions. I just wanted to remind our group, but also unless Dave has something to add on this, since the when our board lost that revenue source back in 2012, they didn't get it restored until about 2017. Since 20 and there were certain understandings about how that would be used and how long it might be used and what it might be used for and so on. And I understand that, and I was active in, you know, as just a sidewinder in those issues. But since 2017, Measure J passed. Monterey Monterey Water got the expansion project in line, and CalAm has objected to additional water supply. So there are all sorts of things that have happened since 2017, and they become active policy and expense items for this district to deal with. And I just want to remind whoever the people are on the committee, but also the point of view, and maybe Tom Raleigh is still on here, is that a lot of things have happened since 2017, and they cannot be ignored in terms of the responsibility this board has. And I just want to remind people of that. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, George. That was good. Thank you. Okay, so shall we take it out to the public and see if any member of the public wishes to comment on this?
See Susan's hand, it went up. So Susan, you have public input.
Thank
Please.
you. I'm here, and as somebody who's been on this panel for, this will be my 6th year, I believe. I just want to reiterate that I do believe this water supply charge is very much needed at this point in time in order to continue to appropriately fund, and as Director Riley stated, responsibly produce and continue to finish building and making the water supply projects that it has taken on. And it's appropriate for Measure J as well, because you're acquiring a water system. And as the legal opinion stated in 2019, that is an appropriate use of fee. So I do support continuing it, sunsetting it when it's appropriate, but it isn't time yet. And I think we're all concerned about what to do about the Mechanics Bank loan. And I think when we get more information, then we'll have some comments about that. But I think it's really important for me to just state that I'm one of the people in the majority on this board at this time that truly supports continuing this supply charge due to its need. And I don't know what the court is going to decide, but that's another matter altogether. But anyway, thank you.
Susan, thank you so much for your comments. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make comment on this? I see one hand, and that's Melody Chrislock. If you want to unmute yourself, there you go. The floor is yours, Melody.
So I'm also on the committee, the 152 committee, and we did discuss, whether we should put numbers to the majority and minority opinions. And we did not do that, but just for this board's reference, as you can probably guess, the majority opinion that the water supply charge should be continued at present is 7. To the minority opinion that it shouldn't is 2. Just so you have some numbers. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Any other people wishing to make comment?
I see no raised hands, or return this back to the board.
Thank you so much. We'll bring it back to the board. Any other questions or comment from board members? And seeing none, I believe
one minute, Chair.
I see one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm learning how to push that raise your hand. Hey, to the general manager and finance, we need to get that from the bank, Mechanic Bank, on how we're going to approach this. You know, I feel that we need to get it because we got to make a decision, and I don't want anybody to think that we're making the decision because of a court case. We need to make that decision, and we need to explain it to the public why are we making that decision. And we need to run it through the gambles of that committee and get it to us so we can discuss it. I know we having a planning session by March 31st. I don't know if you're gonna have it ready by then, but it's a sense of urgency for that now. So I might as well tell you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alvin. Any other comments before we take it to our board for a vote? And if I could please have a motion to approve the ordinance 152 Oversight Panel Annual Report.
move that
Madam
we
Chair, all
Yes,
you're doing is
yes.
receiving the report.
Oh, I'm so sorry. There's no need to have a motion then, is there?
Well, the board should vote to receive the report.
Okay, thank you. We are voting to receive the report. How about that?
I
Oh,
was
like
going
that.
to move that we receive the report.
Thank you. I will take that as the first, and I will take Amy Anderson as the second. So if we could please have a roll call vote.
Director Edwards,
Aye.
Director Paul,
Yes,
Director Riley,
Aye.
Mayor Oglesby,
Aye.
Director Eisenhart,
you're muted.
Now again, aye.
Vice Chair Anderson,
Yes.
Chair Adams.
Aye. Thank you very much. The motion passes. And with that, we will turn to our last item, which is the informational items staff report. Anything, General Manager, that you wish to comment on at this point?
Nope, they're just there for information and
Good, thank
available.
you
And
so
if
much.
anyone has a question, feel free to call.
Very good. Then we go to our last item, which is adjournment. So I thank you all so much for your very robust discussion. And I hope that we will continue our diligent oversight of the charge with which we have been chosen. So with that, we'll adjourn and we'll see you all quite soon. Thank you so much. Bye.